In the 1990s, Japan was building automotive legends. The Supra, the Skyline GTR, the RX-7, all turbocharged, all-wheel drive monsters. But the car that many critics called the greatest of them all, it was a small, front-wheel drive coupe from Honda. How is that even possible? Before Honda built a single car, it built a reputation for winning. The company's founder, Soichiro Honda, was obsessed with racing. He didn't just want to compete, he wanted to dominate on the world stage. In the 1960s, he took his small Japanese company into the Lion's Den, the Formula One World Championship. It was an audacious, almost impossible goal. His team was new. Their resources were limited, but they had an engineering philosophy that no one else did. They believed in lightweight designs and high-revving engines, a belief that efficiency and balance could defeat brute force. In 1965, at the Mexican Grand Prix, they proved it. Their RA-272 race car, piloted by Richie Ginther, took the checkered flag. It was a monumental victory, and the car was painted a simple, stark white, a color that would one day become iconic. This victory wasn't just a win for the company, it was proof of a radical idea. It planted a seed deep within Honda's DNA, a seed that would lay dormant for decades, waiting for the right moment and the right engineer to make it bloom into something legendary. By the late 1980s, Honda was a global giant. They sold millions of reliable, sensible cars. But the spirit of racing was still there, and they decided to build a car to challenge the very best in the world. A supercar to take on Ferrari and Porsche. The project was called the NSX, New Sports Car E-Experimental. The lead engineer was a man named Shigeru Uehara. Uehara was a disciple of Soichiro Honda's original vision. He didn't care about having the most powerful engine. He cared about feeling, connection, control. His team was obsessed with chassis rigidity. Uehara had a simple analogy he called the chef's spatula. A flimsy spatula is imprecise, weak, but a stiff one gives you perfect control. He believed a car's chassis should be the same. The result was the Honda NSX. It was a masterpiece of aluminum and engineering. But for Uehara, it wasn't enough. The standard NSX had made a statement. He wanted to create an exclamation point. In 1992, he unleashed his true vision exclusively for the Japanese market. The NSX R. The R stood for racing. This was not a luxury sports car. It was a weapon. Air conditioning? Gone. Sound deadening? Stripped out. The leather seats were replaced with carbon fiber Recaros. It was lighter, stiffer, and angrier than the original. This was the official birth of the Type R philosophy. It was a declaration that the driver, not the spec sheet, was what truly mattered. The NSX R was a halo car, a legend that few could ever own. But the philosophy it created was about to be unleashed on the masses, and it would start with a humble family coupe. The NSX R was a statement, but the next car was a revolution. In 1995, Honda took the chassis of the ordinary Integra coupe and handed it over to Uehara's team of purists. What they created was arguably the greatest front-wheel drive car in history. The Integra Type R, under the hood, was a masterpiece, the B18C engine, a small 1.8-liter naturally aspirated four-cylinder, but it was hand-ported and blueprinted like a race engine. It produced nearly 200 horsepower. That's over 100 horsepower per liter, a figure that modern turbocharged engines still struggle to match. This wasn't just an engine, it was an instrument. It was calm and docile at low RPMs, but then, at 6,000 revolutions per minute, Vermont EC would engage. The sound would change from a hum to a piercing scream. The car would surge forward with an intensity that defied belief. But the real magic was in the corners. Honda's engineers had reinforced the chassis until it was incredibly stiff. They added a sophisticated double wishbone suspension and a helical limited slip differential, a feature almost unheard of in an FWD car at the time. On paper, it shouldn't have worked. It was front-wheel drive. It was underpowered compared to its rivals. Then, the videos from Japan started to appear. Grainy footage from a show called Time's Best Motoring. They put the Integra Type R on Tsukuba circuit against the Titans. The turbocharged, all-wheel drive, Celica GT4, the rear-wheel drive Nissan Silvia, and the little white Honda didn't just keep up. It harassed them. It outmaneuvered them in the corners. It was a giant killer. Journalists were stunned. One famously wrote it was the most intense, involving, and rewarding driving experience they'd ever had. 2 years later, Honda did it again. They applied the same formula to the humble Civic hatchback, creating the legendary EK9 Civic Type R. It was smaller, lighter, and even more agile. The golden age was here. Honda had created two of the most revered performance cars of the decade. They were JDM heroes, the pride of Japan. But soon, the world would come knocking, and taking a legend global would create a whole new set of problems. The legend of the giant killers could not be contained to Japan. By the early 2000s, the Type R was a global phenomenon. Honda opened a new factory in Swindon, England, to build the next generation. The EP3 Civic Type R became a hero for Europe. The DC5 Integra carried the torch in Japan and other markets. The brand was bigger and more successful than ever before. But with that success came compromise. And in 2007, a deep crack formed in the Type R family. Honda launched two completely different Civic Type Rs for two different parts of the world. For the Japanese market, they created the FD2, a four-door sedan with a razor-sharp chassis and a sophisticated multi-link rear suspension. It was hailed as a true successor to the original legends. But for Europe, the UK factory produced the FN2, a stylish, futuristic-looking hatchback. But underneath, there was a problem. To save money on the production line, Honda had replaced the advanced suspension of its predecessors. The FN2 used a simple, cheaper torsion beam setup. For the purists, this was heresy. It was a betrayal of Shigeru Ihara's core philosophy. The magic, they claimed, was gone. A civil war erupted within the fanbase. In one corner, you had the superior, JDM-only sedan. In the other, the compromised hatchback for the rest of the world. The Type R was no longer one pure, focused vision. It was a brand struggling with its own identity. And as the automotive world began to change, Honda faced an even bigger problem. The era of the high-revving, naturally aspirated engine was coming to an end. The brand would have to adapt, or it would die. For a few years, the Type R name went silent. Production ended. The world moved on. Many feared the legend was dead, a relic of a bygone, naturally aspirated era. But behind the scenes, Honda was planning a radical comeback. They knew the old formula wouldn't work anymore. Emissions regulations were getting stricter, and rivals were making huge power with a new weapon, the turbocharger. For Type R purists, the turbo was the enemy. It dulled engine response. It silenced the iconic VTEC scream. But for Honda's engineers, it was a necessary evil, and they were determined to master it. In 2015, they unleashed the result. The FK2 Civic Type R. It was the first turbocharged Type R in history. The car was a brute with aggressive styling and explosive power, and it had a new mission: to conquer a new battlefield. A terrifying 13-mile ribbon of asphalt in Germany, the Nürburgring Nordschleife. The FK2 briefly captured the front-wheel drive lap record, but the victory was short-lived. Volkswagen struck back with their Golf GTI Club Sport S, setting a blistering time of 7 minutes and 47 seconds. The record was stolen. For Honda, this was not just a defeat, it was a challenge. Their response came in 2017 with the next generation, the FK8. It was a global platform, finally bringing the Civic Type R to America, and it arrived in Germany with a single obsessive goal: to reclaim the crown. Engineers spent months testing, tuning, and refining. On the 3rd of April, 2017, they sent it out for a full attack. The car flew through the green hell. When it crossed the line, the clock stopped at 7 minutes, 43.8 seconds. They hadn't just beaten the record, they had shattered it by over 3 seconds. It was a dominant, undeniable statement. The Type R was back. It may have lost its voice, but it had found a new kind of fury. It had proven it could not only survive in the modern era, but completely dominate it. After the raw aggression of the FK8, the world wondered what was next. The answer arrived in 2022 with the latest generation, the FL5 Civic Type R. This was a different kind of beast. The wild, angular styling was gone, replaced by a mature, refined design. But the philosophy underneath was purer than ever. It was the culmination of over 30 years of learning. It had the turbocharged power needed to compete in the modern world. But it also had the balance, the feedback, and the sublime manual gearbox that defined the original legends. It was the best of both worlds. A car that was both a track weapon and a daily driver. So, how did a company famous for economy cars create one of the most revered performance brands in history? That balance is more important than brute force. That a rigid chassis is the soul of a performance car, and that the connection between the driver and the machine is the ultimate measure of speed. The red badge was never just about being the fastest in a straight line. It was about being the most rewarding to drive. From the raw purity of the Integra to the turbocharged fury of the modern Civic, that single idea has been the unshakable core of the Type R legacy.